The truth DNA tests won't tell you about your Native and Black heritage. Picture this. You're excitedly opening your DNA results, hoping to uncover the Native American heritage your family has always talked about, only to find nothing. How could your family's rich oral history be missing from your genetic story? Is it even possible that your DNA test isn't telling the whole truth? Today, we're diving into the surprising reasons DNA tests often fail to reveal Native American ancestry in African American bloodlines. Stick around until the end because the most shocking reasons could redefine how you think about your heritage, especially number 4. Our journey starts with a question that many African American families wrestle with. Why don't DNA tests reflect the Native ancestry we've always believed in? The answer isn't simple. It's a combination of science, history, and identity. Greetings and welcome. I'm Carolyn A. from GettingToTheRoots.com, where I help African American families uncover their family history through proven research methods and DNA insights. Let's dive in. 1. Dilution of genetic material. Think about your genetic ancestry as a quilt. Each square in this quilt represents a piece of your heritage, stitched together over generations. Over time, some smaller squares, like your Native American ancestry, may fade, their vibrant colors blending into the fabric of the larger quilt. This doesn't mean they're gone, but they've become less visible. Here's where science comes in. DNA testing companies need to detect at least 1 to 2% of a specific ancestry to include it in your results. If your Native ancestors lived many generations ago, their contribution to your genetic quilt might be so faint that it doesn't meet this threshold. For example, if your Native ancestor was 6 or 7 generations back, their DNA would make up less than 1% of your genetic makeup. That's like trying to find a single thread in an intricate, multicolored quilt. It's there, but not easy to see with the tools we have today. 2. Blended histories of African and Native Americans. Let's travel back in time to understand the deeply intertwined histories of African Americans and Native Americans. From the earliest days of colonization, these communities often found themselves on common ground, whether through shared struggles, alliances, or family connections. During the era of slavery, many enslaved Africans sought refuge among native tribes, forming bonds that went beyond survival. Marriages, cultural exchanges, and blended families became part of the story. In some cases, African Americans and Native Americans fought together against oppression, creating tight-knit communities where their lives and legacies became inseparable. But this beautiful blending of cultures presents a challenge for DNA tests. When two ancestries mix over generations, their genetic markers can become so intertwined that tests struggle to separate them. Without detailed records to complement the science, it's almost impossible to trace these shared histories through DNA alone. 3. Identity and the stories we carry. Let's take a moment to think about the stories we tell about our roots. For many African American families, claiming Native ancestry wasn't just about genetics. It was about finding pride and belonging in a world that often devalued their Black identity. These stories became a way to rise above the pain of slavery and connect with a history that felt noble, dignified, and outside the harsh realities of their own lived experiences. Some of these stories may not have been completely accurate. In some cases, they may have been exaggerated, misunderstood, or even fabricated over generations. This wasn't done to deceive, but rather to build a sense of identity in a time when the truth of their African heritage was dismissed or overshadowed by the horrors of slavery. Families needed a narrative that empowered them, one that tied them to something greater than the cruelty they endured. 4. The incomplete map of DNA testing. Now, let's talk about the maps DNA tests use to identify your ancestry. These maps are built from reference populations, groups of people whose genetic information represents specific regions or ethnicities. But here's the catch: not all native tribes are included in these databases. Imagine trying to represent 1 million people by studying only 5 of them. That small sample can't capture the full diversity of the larger group. This is exactly what happens with DNA tests, leading to incomplete and sometimes inaccurate results for native tribes or African ethnic groups. This lack of representation means that if your native ancestry comes from an unrepresented tribe, your DNA test might not show it at all. For instance, some companies focus on tribes in North America but exclude those in Central or South America, where many African-descended people also share native heritage. To make matters worse, some tribes have chosen not to participate in DNA research due to concerns over privacy, cultural appropriation, and the misuse of genetic data. This means that the genetic story of many native communities remains untold, leaving gaps in the databases that DNA tests rely on. 5. The tragic erasure of native history? Now, let's talk about a painful truth: the systematic erasure of native history. Colonization brought displacement, disease, and violence, which devastated native populations. But the damage didn't stop there. Efforts to assimilate native people, such as forcing children into boarding schools and suppressing their languages, severed many families from their roots. This erasure extended to records as well. Many native communities lost the documentation that could have preserved their history, making it even harder for their descendants to trace their ancestry today. For African Americans with native heritage, these missing records create a double layer of difficulty: the challenges of slavery's historical gaps and the loss of native documentation. It's like trying to complete a puzzle when half the pieces are missing. Even if you have the DNA, the context needed to make sense of it has been lost to time. So, what does this mean for your family story? DNA tests are powerful tools, but they're not the full picture. To truly uncover your heritage, you need to look beyond the science. Oral histories, family records, and cultural knowledge are just as important as genetic data in painting a complete picture of your ancestry. DNA tests often miss the full picture when it comes to Black and Native history. For Black families, research presents a unique challenge due to the legacy of slavery, which disrupted family connections and records. That's why I've created a dedicated series, Your First Steps in Black Genealogy, just for us to help navigate these challenges and reclaim our heritage. That's a wrap on why DNA tests get Black and Native history so wrong. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Peace and love.